All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode, the Mindgasms podcast. I'm going to talk to Jenkins B. Jennings, all aka Brien Jennings. I don't know. I didn't know which to call you, so I just called you Jenkins B. Jennings in
Yeah,
the
Jenkins
title of
works.
this.
Brian's my actual day job name, but whichever doesn't matter. I'll answer both.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, we're going to talk about journalism and education. And, uh, and I know that you teach journalism. So you've got some knowledge on that. And I know we talked about this on the mixed mental arts chat on this topic too. So I wanted to sort of kind of rehash what we said in that a little bit, maybe go farther into it a little bit, maybe go in some different directions.
Mhm.
But yeah, so how did you get into journalism in the first place? And if I remember correctly, you you used to like be a practicing journalist and then you transitioned to teaching it, or is that how it worked, or what?
Yeah, so I don't uh, formally teach journalism. So I'm a teacher. I teach to fourth grade. Um,
Okay.
I'm a library media specialist, so I kind of structured my job around teaching it and the basics of it. But there's only so deep you can get with 10-year-olds.
Right. Right.
Um, but yeah, I started as a broadcast news photographer. So I worked there for a bunch of years, and then decided that that was not all that I was hoping it would be, and went back to become a teacher to try to teach. Like, so when I was doing this job, it became clear to me, like, holy cow, these people don't really put that much thought into what they're creating here. And then it's going out to the public who are just consuming it, and I guarantee they're not putting any thought into it. So maybe I should try to educate some people about it. That's
Oh, okay.
that's basically it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a good idea, man. Like you definitely, we talked about this in the mixed mental arts chat. You definitely see articles all the time that they're either just like clickbait fake news, or they're just really poorly researched, or they're so biased that you can really easily tell they're biased, but they sort of they cater to people with that political bias,
Yeah.
and it's just like it's this game of telephone with some journalists too, like, hey, did you hear about this? Let's all report on the same thing.
Oh yeah, no, that's
Yeah.
exactly what. So, I mean, it's a combination. They talk about all the time this conspiracy where the press is pushing an agenda, and sometimes they absolutely are. If you watch MSNBC or Fox News, they're just bald faced with it. But a lot of the problem comes from what you described. Like they're not researching, they're lazy, and they're a lot of the time deciding what the story is before they even go out on it. And like a typical news day will start with a meeting where they go through the newspaper and decide what they're going to cover. So that's for broadcast. Print way back in the day would put more time into it, but even they're not putting the time into it now because they have to do all the, you know, I'm going to do my live tweet of this, or I'm going to not only be a print journalist, now I have to be a broadcast journalist as well. So it's just a mess,
You think
basically.
they're catering to like fringe political audiences or something like that out of desperation? Do you think there's anything to that narrative?
I I don't know if there's a conscious. I don't know if there's a document anywhere, but they certainly. I think what they're trying to do is, that small group that's really noisy gets a lot of attention. So they're trying to sell that attention, or they're trying to sell that narrative to grab the attention of the masses that are still watching news. Like I
Oh,
haven't
okay.
watched news in a long time, and I'm better informed now than I was when I was working in news. Like you just have to dig a little deeper. And I think what the most media, we'll use the word media for this, what they're doing right now is they're trying to just kind of cast a big wide net, and whatever they have to do it is what they will do. They
Hmm.
I remember staff meetings where they'd bring in a consultant, and they never use the word uh, information or education. It was they used the word infotainment. And they were very clear about it. Like, look, our job is to get people to watch. That's it. Whatever gimmick we can use to do that is what we'll use, because it's about money.
Right.
Bottom line.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and with the with the alternative media that like YouTube and stuff like that, that can be a double-edged sword too. Like they're like with me, for example, and I'm definitely not the only person who does this. I watch like if I'm looking for like political news or something like that, like I watch a bunch of different YouTube channels from a wide variety of different political ideologies. So it's interesting to me to hear about this one story from a progressive perspective, and then a centrist perspective, and then a conservative perspective, and sort of like decide for myself what seems the most reasonable. But then I'm obviously tons of people, they just go like with only the progressive narrative, or only like a centrist narrative, or only a libertarian narrative, or only a conservative narrative, which is much easier to do with the internet because it's easier to fall into echo chambers too, right?
Right. And I think it says it all that in today's culture of media consumption and using media, you or I, because I kind of fall into the same realm as you, we'd be the ones that are looked at like the kooks.
Right.
They're like, wait a minute, you're supposed to take one side or another side, and if you're not doing that, then you're the enemy, which is crazy. I love Dan Carlin's. He calls himself a political Martian,
Yeah, yeah.
and there are some times where I don't know if you've listened to the show, but when he
Oh
used to
yeah,
say common
yeah. I love
sense,
Dan Carlin.
and it's like that's perfect description. But everyone should be a Martian,
Yeah,
and maybe we all are, but we just need to embrace it.
yeah, yeah. For sure, for sure, man. I was thinking earlier. By the way, I don't think I told you this before, but a few years ago, I actually started a degree in journalism. But I've only done the first semester so far, and I haven't gone back to finish it. But I remembered from when you were describing at the beginning that that there are two different types of journalism you can go into. You can choose to specialize in the photojournalism or the written journalism. And it sounds like you chose the video journalism. I was wanting to more focus on the writing aspect of it. Does it actually get that that strict sort of division as you get farther into your degree, or is there sort of a mix or something like that?
Honestly, my degree was in literature. So
Oh,
I was the
okay.
same as you. I took some journalism courses. I was going to minor in it. They At the University of Rhode Island is where I went. You had to take a test to get in, and I went as far as taking the test, and then just decided not to pursue it any further. But I can tell you, based on what courses are offered, there's right now it's all kind of lackluster. It's all
Okay.
like they yeah, lackluster would be the word. There's definitely there used to be more effort put into print, and broadcast was kind of where you'd string a bunch of cliches together and then hope for the visuals to flesh it out more. But I don't know, the rigor. I think the level, it's leveling and not. It would be great if all broadcast was the way some broadcast is. Some of the PBS stuff is really good, and BBC. But I think instead of everyone raising, they're all lowering, and sadly that gets the numbers, because that gets people scared and outraged and talking and watching.
Yeah. And like if we're talking about YouTube, for example, uh, it's if you sell like the outrage clickbait, if you cater to, that's basically catering to the algorithm, which gets you more views, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. And then you get people who should know better, people who work in the industry of they may not be working in news anymore, but they're still working creating media, and they'll Steven Crowder, who I'll watch Steven Crowder because he's entertaining, but I'll watch him knowing like, okay, this is definitely a skew.
Yeah.
He put out something that YouTube was taking him down, and this friend of mine he was outraged by they're taking away the freedom. Is like, if you had investigated for 5 minutes, you would have seen there was just a copyright infringement because he took a Kiss song and did a terrible song parody, and that's just not allowable for the algorithm of YouTube.
I didn't even realize that aspect of it. I thought it was because of his shirt that he sells that says "Socialism is for figs."
That was one. So I guess YouTube, you get 3 strikes.
Oh, okay.
And they count. So one of them, he had a few of them, but the one in question that caused the outrage was I mean, Kiss is terrible anyway, but he did an even worse version of a Kiss song, and it wasn't clever, but the real, I guess in quotes, crime was not him saying something they disagreed with. It was he took the melody of a Kiss song, as far as a melody in a Kiss song can go, and used it as a so you could do a parody of a song if you're discussing the song. He was using the song to discuss, I don't know, with Obama or something like that. And if that's me, I apologize. Yeah, sorry.
What was his third strike?
I don't know, because I only investigated it far enough to find out that it was just a copyright, and even that was taken care of. It was, but to stoke the outrage, he put out a video addressing it as
the Carlos Maza thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Then that was it. So the Carlos Maza thing with him calling him a lispy queer, that didn't get him a strike, right?
Not for copyright. It may have done something to demonetize him. I know they're really strict with any kind of subject matter, and because it's not human, it's just an algorithm that's recognizing something. So a really good one, a guy from Cracked. It's called Even More News. Cody Johnston does I think it's a weekly segment, and if he does a segment on Israel, the fact that he's discussing Israel will raise a flag and possibly demonetize him, or if he criticizes Biden. Now he tends towards more liberal, but as a comedic presenter, he'll kind of nail everybody. And if he nails the right subject matter, then it's recognized by the algorithm and he'll be demonetized for it. So it's not a copyright thing in that case, though.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the algorithms, they can be tricky. Like for a good example is when Dusty and I did the Mixed Mental Arts chat on freedom of speech. I think the title was Free Speech, and before he even started the chat, it got demonetized.
Yeah, well, because that's become what's the word?
People say it's a right-wing dog whistle.
Yeah, like, okay, well, that's it's fantastic what technology can do, but the limitations are right there. Like,
yeah, so you probably didn't see this, but I did an episode with Alex Bello about the tech monopolies. And
yes, I did.
Oh, you did? Did you see us discussing this very issue? We were sort of debating about free speech and like what like random percentage, just guessing, is actually right-wing dog whistles.
Mm-hmm.
And so what do you think about that?
I don't know what the solution to it is. I mean, I think I hate to even come close to quoting. Like I think people are wrong on each side, and I think because I forget if it was you or her that described it as it's an engineer who's making this decision.
Oh, she did.
Okay,
Yeah.
I think that's the problem. I mean, an engineer is going to go with a solution that maybe solves a problem, and that's great if it's a bridge or an automobile, but for something like this, that doesn't work. So I'm not a big fan of committees or councils or anything, but maybe it shouldn't just be left up to an engineer to come up with a
Yeah.
solution for it, because that is crazy. That's
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And like this whole thing where it's an algorithm that gets people demonetized, like I understand from an efficiency perspective that that makes sense, and I guess like pragmatically, it wouldn't work to have a person investigate each individual case, but I mean, it would be ultimately better for someone's account to get looked at by a person before they get banned or demonetized or something like that, so it can be looked at in the relevant context. Like this an aspect of this is that it's backfiring on people who are criticizing like alt-right people and Nazis and stuff like that, because sometimes they do things like quote them in order to dismantle their arguments or something like that, and these algorithms don't understand the relevant context.
I think I think it even goes beyond that though. Like if you look at just people communicating, you can't in to just what you described. You're using a quote from a Nazi or something. You
Mhm.
can't quote the Nazi without somebody else jumping on it. And it's not an algorithm. It's just it's now become a cultural thing, a cultural algorithm where we're just as a I'll include Canada with the United States. Sorry. But we're just so addicted to jumping on that kind of thing.
Oh yeah.
We're just hunters put it in ways that much far better than I would, but you're jumping on that one detail and you're ignoring the context of it.
Yeah.
And that's a huge problem. Like you see it in education, you see it in journalism, you see it in just conversation. Like, wait a minute, you're not hearing how I said that word. So let's step back. I'm criticizing. I think if we mystify language and make it magical, that's a dangerous thing.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I agree.
And there are certain things that are becoming like Voldemort. I don't know if you've read Harry Potter, but
Of course. Yeah.
you know the name that cannot be spoken, and that's a superstition. You know that does go back to a superstition of you voicing something brings it closer to you. Where my grandmother once. I'm older than you, so I remember the '80s, the Satanic Panic, and I mentioned the word Satan in my grandmother's house, and she spit on the floor. Satan, get out! And spit on the floor. That's magical thinking. That's superstition, and it's crossed into the realm of just discourse. And
Yeah.
who's going to be
Yeah.
burned at the stake?
Yeah. Exactly. And that's a good analogy too. Like it's they're a witch hunt, like you were saying, people just jump on people when they use these certain magical words, and then there are witch hunts on both sides too. Like the people on the right, they go on witch hunts looking for left-wing people who say bad things that they disagree with, or who left-wing people who are trying to ban right-wing people, and then the complete opposite from from the opposite direction too. Like left-wing people go around looking for right-wing people who said something offensive so they can get all mad and try to get them banned or something like that. And it's just it's entertaining but also sad.
Yeah, it's a cheap grab at power,
Yeah.
and it is sad, and it's sad that a reasonable discussion of something. Again, we're the Martians.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. It's funny because I talk with Dusty about this sometimes too. Like Most people seem to think I'm very reasonable because I can understand why someone would want to be conservative or progressive or libertarian, and but then it's the really far extreme people, like, and it's only a few people, like maybe a handful of people that I can think of off the top of my head. It's like really far left people or really far right people. Those are the only people who think I'm either way too far left or way too far right, which
Right.
is
And
really
they
fun.
think the same thing about you, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
My wife and I have talked about this too, and anytime there's a dogma attached to someone's argument, you've lost me.
Yeah.
Anytime I have to just unquestioningly accept something, I'm out. When you demonize, whether it's demonizing social justice warriors or demonizing Wall Street, no, like no, that's simplistic. That's not leading anywhere but to continuing a narrative of people tuning in because they want to be outraged or afraid.
Yeah. It's like how, in terms of your examples, it's like how social justice warrior is sometimes used as an ad hominem attack, basically, or in the case of like Wall Street, or even just like corporate corruption or something like that. People say sometimes that person's funded by the Koch brothers, like
Right,
as if that, and they use that as an ad hominem attack too.
right. Well, that's I was at a conference last year on media literacy, and there are a bunch of media literacy groups, and they don't always see eye to eye. Go figure. And so, two of the people who were on this presentation team with me, one belonged to one group, and the other belonged to another. And in their discussion, one would not join this other group because this other group had taken corporate money in order to produce some of their videos, and that was not pure. They weren't on board with that, ignoring the fact that they're at a conference at UMass Amherst, which takes corporate money all the time. So because the platform was there for them to get up and act pure, they took it, but they weren't willing to. And I'm sure if I said it, I would have gone over like a fart in an elevator. But you know, they it just seems that everyone has an agenda and they're willing to ignore anything that goes against the agenda. And if you
Yeah.
point it out, you're the bad guy. And that's where, so if you point out something about the far left, they think you're far right, and vice versa. If you point out something about the far right, they think you're too far left. You just, they've, and who they is, I have no idea, but they've succeeded in creating this kind of catch-22 where you can't win by being sensible. Now.
Yeah. And there's also this thing too where you're not allowed to talk to people on the other team. Like, some people think that there's this platforming issue. Some people think that if you talk to this one person,
Right.
they're evil, and therefore you also agree with all of their ideas, therefore you are also evil.
Right. Rogan having
Yeah. Exactly.
name
Like,
Alex Jones on there.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
He just like, yeah, I always find this hilarious about Joe Rogan. Like, he just likes to talk to people about a lot of different ideas,
Yeah.
and sometimes he challenges people, sometimes he doesn't challenge people. He doesn't just like never challenge anyone, and often people who he gets accused of not challenging enough, he actually, if you watch the episodes, he actually does challenge them, at least on some issues. And then other time, there have been other times where he said, like, for example, with his first episode with Jack Dorsey, after that he said, I wasn't properly prepared. People were mad that I didn't talk about all of these cases because I just didn't know about them. So then at the next episode after that one, he had Jack Dorsey and Tim Pool and that woman whose name I always forget, who was I think she was some sort of either law or like technical expert for Twitter.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know. but yeah, and here's the thing. If you have, and I'll go back to Alex Jones because he for me is the gorilla in the room. You
Yeah.
don't need to challenge him.
No,
You know,
you don't.
just let him speak.
That's like basically what Joe Rogan did the last time Alex Jones was on his show, because there was this whole like scandal where where Alex Jones got all mad at Joe Rogan and stuff like that,
Yeah,
and he didn't want to have him on his show because even he was worried about the backlash a little bit. But then he had him back on the show, and it was like one of the most popular episodes ever. And in that episode, he pretty much, for the most part, just did what you said he does. Like, he just let Alex Jones go on these crazy rants, and eventually he starts talking about like interdimensional child molesters and like
right.
people conspiring to control the world with the world government, and all this all this other crazy stuff. It's hilarious.
Anytime I can use the phrase "hoisted on your own petard," I jump at it.
Yeah.
Let him do it. Let him speak. If your beliefs are that weak, then they're not valid either. That's they're in school. There was a student teacher, and they were doing a project on medieval life, and that's centers around the building of cathedrals, basically in medieval Europe. Anyway, so I gave her one of David Macaulay's books, Cathedral. He goes, he's an artist who will illustrate from the start to the finish of a project. They're really good books. Well, I can't take that one because I have a student who's a born again Christian and they can't see the cross or something.
Oh wow.
So I mean, that's foolish.
Yeah.
Born again Christians, but that is foolish. But that's just a snapshot of what we're talking about here. Like, okay, this is a representation of something that should not threaten you. Alex Jones should not threaten you. That just gives him more credibility in the eyes of people who are more inclined to follow him.
Yeah, like it's like it's this like the same sort of thing that happened with Alex Jones is what happened to Steven Crowder's. Like they got well, not exactly the same thing, because Alex Jones got banned from everything, but with Steven Crowder getting demonetized, it was similar in that with both of them, it just dramatically increased their popularity, because it's like, ooh, it's a taboo now. I can't look at this bad person. That makes me want to look at them.
Right, and it's so disingenuous on their part to present it as outrage, and they know exactly. Well, I suspect they know exactly what they're doing. It's like drive time talk show on the radio. I often question whether they believe what they're peddling. So if they don't believe what they're peddling, people, let's stop believing what they're peddling, or let's at least question it and not take it as gospel.
Yeah. So I think this would be a good place to go into a little bit of what we talked about before in terms of sort of tactics and strategies to use to identify something that seems like it's not been totally researched enough, or to tell, or in terms of like YouTube or something, to be able to tell when someone is saying something that they haven't researched much. I think and I know you're better at explaining this than me, but I know like in terms of like watching videos or something like that, it can be easy sometimes, especially when someone just, like you were saying earlier, they just make these statements, but they don't have anything to back up where they heard this or how they know this to be true. They just say it with such authority that that it convinces people that what they're saying is true, because they're saying it with so much confidence. Like that's why some people believe some of the crazy shit that Alex Jones says, for example. Like he's all like, the interdimensional child molesters, and he says it so crazily that people believe him.
He says it crazily, but he does it. He puts it out as if he believes it, which I cannot possibly believe it. Really, and I am not the person to throw the first stone, because this happens to me too. But I do 90% of the time just take a minute to stop and just do really quick research. You know, for the most part, I do an exercise, and again, because I'm dealing with younger kids, there's only so deep I can get into it. But I do an exercise where we can find something fake, and then within a minute or two, find out why it's not true.
Mhm.
And that's really all it takes. You know, if it's something's important, and I always have to be cautious because I don't want to create a bunch of people who are conspiracy theorists.
Right.
But if it's important to you, you owe it to yourself and the world around, but mainly to yourself to do your job and just check.
Mhm.
And really, for the most part, it takes under 5 minutes to do it.
And the interesting, um, well, the interesting and also kind of negative thing, um, about the way that that happens is that, like, even if someone gives a statistic or something like that, especially if you're talking about a political debate or a political issue, people can cite something like how effective gun control is, for example, and you can find studies that show that it's really effective, and you can find other studies that show that it's really not effective. It depends on who funded the study and how it was performed, and that sort of thing too. So that can get really confusing too, because you can find so much contrary data to show something one way or the other way.
Right. So and you can do that with the statistics too. You can skew them however you feel fits the story you want to tell. So a big and the really young kids don't get it. I have signs everywhere. The question is the most important thing. And it goes back to like a framing thing. Ask the question the right way. So, okay, maybe both of these are presenting different data, but how is that data arrived at then? And again, it is a limitation for younger kids, but for older kids and adults, forget about it. That's you've got to ask the question. You've got to, and journalism does this all the time. They don't go beyond um the abstract of an article or the headline of an article. Well, sorry, you've just done it to yourself. That's bad, but now you're doing it to me too. That's worse. That's
Yeah. And like with that sort of thing, they can bury the lead of the article. And then if most people just read the headline and they don't read the whole article, then they sort of miss the main point of it.
yeah, and unfortunately, we're now in a place where it seems like it's just encouraged to not take that responsibility. Well, they should have put it in the abstract or they should have put it in the headline. Like, no, you bear personal responsibility for things. You know, when Zuckerberg was talking to Congress, and they were all, I don't know if you saw any of it, but they were all asking him, you know, what do you do about people who are being peddled disinformation? And at no point, and I understand that he really probably couldn't do it in that venue because they would have just enacted all sorts of legislation, but I just wanted to stand in his place for 1 second and say, are these adults we're talking about? And if they are, then it's their job. It's not my job as the person behind this platform. I'm not a huge Zuckerberg fan, but like, at what point does personal responsibility enter into it? So my
Yeah.
hope is that like, and I don't have any illusions. I no illusions left after working in news and education for as long as I have. So I don't think I'm hitting the majority of people anyway. But if just a few people can start to take that responsibility of, oh, let me check a couple of other sites to see this, or let me look at a couple of other videos to see the veracity of this, then that's a start. You know,
Yeah.
I'm not going to change the world. I know this. I'm not that kind of crazy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. And like it can be fun to do that sort of thing like we were talking about earlier too. Like if you see this one article, you might know, like I usually, like I was saying earlier, now just sort of have the tendency to if I see an article, I notice the political slant to it, and I think, I wonder what other political ideologies think about this, and it'll be entertaining to me to see the different ways that people interpret what happened.
Right. Even just the different photo choices they'll use.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I try to demonstrate how that bubble is created. So what I'll do is we'll talk a little bit about how Google works, and there are certain sites where the ads will update depending on your browsing. So I'll talk about this site's dependable. BBC, let's say, is a dependable site. I'm pretty sure their ads work this way. And we'll look at a couple of stories, and then I'll interrupt and say, oh, you know what? Hang on. I'm really sorry. I just remembered I want to buy a new guitar. So do you guys mind if I look on Guitar Center and look at some guitars? And then I'll look at the guitars, and I'll look at the really expensive ones to keep them, as an audience. And then I'll apologize. Sorry, that was irresponsible. Let's go back to what we were talking about. And then when you refresh the page, it updates the ads, and all the ads are guitars. And
Oh, yeah.
that's a good demonstration for kids of how that works. If you were to go to somebody's house who loves Trump or Trudeau, and then you go to somebody's house who detests Trump or Trudeau, you're going to get different results. And
yeah.
and I guess I'm in my own little bubble where it's still shocking to me that people don't get that's the
Yeah.
case. So
Yeah.
my hope is, and I'm in a very small town, but my hope is you get kids to go home and tell their parents, like, oh, this is how this works. And again, this is pie in the sky, but the parents are like, wait a minute, that's why I got an advertisement about wallpaper on my Facebook. Wallpaper,
Yeah. It's like it's so interesting too, because like, I know I have a well, for if we're talking about Trump, for example, I have a relative who has, like, literally the farthest left position you can possibly think. Like, he literally thinks that Trump is a Nazi or something like that. And then I also have a friend who has the totally opposite perspective, and he's like in love with Trump or something like that. I make fun of him sometimes for that, and it's really funny because, like, I don't know what media my family member pays attention to exactly, but it wouldn't surprise me if it's like completely the opposite of my Trump loving friend, who just, like, it seems like he gets all of his information from Fox News and InfoWars. So,
Yeah.
like, if you if you're getting all of your news from one particular slant, it's going to make you think that's what's happening. And like you were saying, if you like look at all of these headlines about, hey, look at the awesome stuff that Trump did today, then the next thing that pops up will be, hey, look at this other great thing that Trump did today. And he did something great yesterday too, and it looks like he'll do something great tomorrow. Isn't Trump so awesome?
Right. Yeah. And that's well, I think that's the explanation for it. Is it's comfortable for people to stay with what they know,
Yeah.
and that's going to determine, like, so when I was working in television news, we're in a 3-station market. The number one station was the first station to start broadcasting. We're talking in the 50s. The number 2 station was the second one. The number 3 station was the third one. There was no difference in quality. There was no difference in stance, because this is local news. They don't really have any political agenda at all, other than just weird kind of bunch of boobs. And it was based completely on, oh, I moved to this state when this started broadcasting, and this is what I'll go with, and that's it. And that's, I guess people just they think, and I used to, they think of that fourth estate. I don't know if they call it that in Canada, but the press was the fourth estate, right? And
Yeah.
I used to think of it in the same way. This is the group that's looking out for us, and this is the group that holds power accountable, and this is why I got out of it. Like, no, this is just the group that is trying to generate money through selling the stories so they can sell ads, and that's it.
Yeah.
Um, and again, so the alternatives are sometimes just as sketchy, and there's nothing wrong with making money, but just know that that's what their main goal is. Google's main goal is not to provide you with information, it's to generate money for the shareholders. NBC's main goal is not to tell you how bad Trump is, it's to get the most people watching so they can sell more ad time. And the same for Fox. It's always follow the money is my cynical conclusion.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, do you think do you have like an optimistic or a pessimistic view of the future? Because like I've I think it's reasonable. It sounds reasonable to me both when people talk about how, oh, this is getting worse and worse and it's going to get really bad. Although I don't agree with this whole it's going to lead to a civil war or all that kind of extreme narrative. But then also I I find it reasonable when I've heard people talk about, well, yeah, the news sells outrage, and yeah, people are basing their reality on the outrage that they're sold in the news, but it doesn't actually represent a large aspect of reality. And most of the people who are following that are really obsessed with this stuff, at least, are like a tiny, tiny percentage of actual people because most people don't actually pay that much attention to it.
Yeah, I think that hits it dead on because I think for the most part, and I mean vast majority, the outrage is a passive outrage. You know, like a civil war is not going to happen as long as everybody's got streaming or cable and everyone's got enough food to eat and everyone's got a car that they're paying off. Like that one of my first jobs graduating college was delivering mail, and I delivered mail to some really really rough neighborhoods. And this was back in my fiery days, and I just remember thinking like, why are these people should be outraged in the streets? And then as I'm delivering the mail, you know they're all driving nicer cars than I have, or a lot of them are. There there are a lot of satellite dishes or cable or large TVs. Like, oh yeah, this is why they're comfortable. Again, to go to the comfortable thing, if as long as you keep people comfortable, they don't care. I forget what comedian pointed out. So in the '80s, it was a big. We got to watch out for Russia or the Soviet Union. They watch everything you do, and there's nothing to buy. And now, and again, I wish I could remember this comedian. Now it's like, oh, we don't really care about the watching part. It was just there's nothing to buy. So as long as we can buy stuff, you can watch us in the can, you can watch us in the streets, you can watch us wherever you want. Your phones can listen to whatever because we can buy stuff. And I think that's, there's not going to be a civil war. I do think I do worry on in a different realm, not just the discourse, but I think we're in a race between Star Trek and the Road Warrior.
Oh, that's an interesting analogy.
If we don't start getting a little more responsible with things, we might go the Road Warrior route, or if things keep going really well. And so you asked if I'm an optimist. I lean towards Star Trek, but I'm ready for the Road Warrior. You know what I mean?
I think that's a good way to be.
Yeah, just me and my dog.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah, there's something appealing to me sometimes about post-apocalyptic um, movies and novels sometimes. Just only like the looking at it as sort of a
yeah.
video game aspect though. Like
Yep.
not that I would actually want to experience it for a
Oh,
long period of time in reality. It sounds appealing to me to have this aspect of just like trying to survive, maybe for like a week or two, and then I would probably just think, no, I want to go back to my comfortable life now.
Right. It's kind of like a Renaissance fair type of thing, where it's like, oh yeah, I'd love to be Mad Max and do this, or I'd love to be a knight, but now I'd just be a toothless, pox-ridden peasant. So
Yeah,
it's nice to go pretend, but yeah, I'm really hoping for the Star Trek. I,
yeah,
I like to listen to people like James Burke talk about the future and what we can do and what we can hope for and try to avoid. And I like listening to. Have you ever listened to James Kunstler?
no,
He's a really good writer, but man, is he so negative. And I realized that the contagion of negativity, because I'd listen to him. You know, I listen to podcasts while I'm working on houses or whatever, and I was just so down and like nasty and in such a bad mood. And I realized it was because I was listening to, because he is a doom and gloom. We're running out of oil. It's just a matter of time. There's nothing we can do. Like, you know what? I'm not listening. I'm going to choose to listen to James Burke or Brian Callen, or something more hopeful. So I choose to be hopeful with I think enough realism to be like, okay, I'll I will
yeah,
keep a skill set beyond just technical skills. I will keep a skill set where I know how to build something or cut something up or something.
yeah, yeah. That's a good idea.
How
And
so which way do you lean?
well, I think I sort of lean more to, let's say, more towards the Star Trek end of things too. I mean, I don't like to. I would say my perspective is almost the same as yours. Like I it or maybe even perhaps a little more optimistic. I mean, I don't like to be naive or anything like that, but I mean, a few other aspects of this are that like for example, it seems to often be the case that when there when there are like white supremacist rallies or something like that, they're completely outnumbered by
Yeah.
Antifa or protesters against them or something like that. So it seems like this. I mean, obviously the right wing and left wing extremism are problems in my opinion, but like this, I don't think the right wing violence is going to like take over and escalate into a civil war for that reason. The only way that it maybe could is if the right wing extremists get so tired of being drowned out by so many more left wing extremists that their audience grows or something like that. But I'm I mean some of this that I like to remind myself of often too is that people, it's not like a new thing for people to be like yelling about how the sky is falling and stuff like that. It's not a new thing for people to hate the president and think the world is going to end and stuff. And I do find it reasonable sometimes when people talk about how right now is so much worse than it's been before. But then like another example that's coming to my mind right now is when I was talking with Eric Hunley on here, and I think he was telling me about it was either the first or second American presidential election when one candidate literally shot the other candidate.
Yeah.
So I don't think we're as bad as that yet.
No, and they would I forget which, but it was around the same time they would write spurious letters or stories about their opponents. Or in Congress, there were, it may have been in the 1800s, they would attack with a cane some of the other members of Congress. So I I am by no means saying that things are not bad right now, because they are really dishearteningly bad.
Yeah.
When you asked if I'm an optimist, again, I choose to be an optimist, but what gets me down is like so many people that like it's a choice
Hmm.
to be that ignorant. It's a choice to engage in that level. So if white supremacists are marching and there's 50 of them, ignore them.
Yeah, that's what
You
I
know,
think.
you
Like,
know,
let them go to their rally where no one shows up and then no one cares. And
right?
if the media doesn't go there, then there won't be so many people outraged about it.
Right. It's only becoming a thing because you made it a thing.
Yeah.
Before that, it was 40 frustrated people who lost their job in manufacturing or whatever, or just were raised by people who had similarly dumb ideas. But now you've made it significant. Like, no, take the hunter route. Mock maybe, or even better, just ignore. You know, that's and if it becomes something that's threatening to you, by all means, strike. But at this stage, it really is. It doesn't warrant the reaction that it gets. And I understand, like, stuff that's said is hurtful, stuff that's said is wrongheaded and all that. But it's like you're missing the best strategy, which is just don't even dignify it. And
Yeah.
that, I tell my kids, like, don't don't back away from it. If someone wants to start a fight with you, then you absolutely defend yourself. They're they're not starting a fight. They're just, I don't know. I mean, I suppose they are starting a fight, but not in that same way. Like, it's a tricky one.
It's like they're bullies, but they're just like yelling insults across a hallway or something like that.
Right. Yeah. That's a great way of describing it. They're bullies with nothing behind them. And
Yeah.
it's so clear that there's nothing behind them. And I understand the danger of it becoming something as you ignore it. But I've always paid attention to this kind of thing. Because while I hope for optimism, I'm fascinated with the dark side of things and
Oh
the
yeah.
dark side of the way humans think. It's always been there. It's just that it's easier to find. You're not having to look at a magazine calling them out now. It's all over the place because it gets eyeballs.
Yeah.
It's that war for attention, and sadly, stupidity is winning the war for attention.
And it's so like it's I don't know, it's like a sad comedy or something like that, that the first president of the who's really extremely involved in social media in the really extremely obsessed social media age is Trump. It's it's so
Right.
funny because it's like he's like a cartoon character on Twitter, and then people take everything he says so seriously too, which I'm sure he does. He is serious about what a lot of what he says, but I think he's kind of like at least half trolling sometimes too.
Yeah, I suspect that he's the real danger of him is he doesn't believe anything. You know,
Yeah,
I think he's got certain curmudgeon things. He's like certain fathers I know, but he was born with millions instead of blue collar. And so he might have some ideas, but they're very thin ideas.
yeah.
He gauges their merit by the reaction he gets from the crowd, and like he's full, he has to know he's full of baloney.
And like in some ways that's why it's simultaneously good and bad, that Trump is that way, because like what he does depends on who he listens to. Like
Right.
like his military one of his military advisors, John Bolton, wants to start a war in Iraq, but then I think I posted this video of about how Tucker Carlson on
Tucker
Fox News
Carlson.
convinced Trump to not attack Iran, at least for now. So I was just thinking, well, I'm not a fan of Tucker Carlson, but that's
Right.
good. In that instance, it's good that he pays attention to Tucker Carlson.
Yeah, I'm similarly not a fan of Tucker Carlson, but what again, I'm gonna steal a Hunter quote, but I think it's one of the presidents of China. I don't care if the cat is black or the cat is white, as long as it catches mice. Tucker
Yeah,
Carlson caught mice with that, and you know what? And I always say this with Trump, where we haven't escalated any of the wars we're still in, and we haven't gotten embroiled in a new one. We've come close to some real stupidity. But I'm not convinced that if things had been different, we wouldn't be in even deeper where we're already involved or involved in someplace new. Like it's yeah, which people I'm sure will hate that I'm saying that even. But
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Well, I mean it's like it seems like based on Hillary Clinton's past policies, for example, that she would definitely continue the wars that are being engaged in by the United States.
yeah, I kind of lean that way myself. I so here's a possible silver lining. It's always driven me crazy because people here they fetishize the president. Like
Hmm.
they fetishize the flag, they fetishize the military, and maybe some of the people who would be more given to that, because the president is nothing but an elected official. So he's elected by far more people, and he has more power than the mayor or the town council member here. But president's nothing like to take away from my I forget who said, but you have to be crazy to want it in the first place.
Hmm.
And I don't care about. For a while, people were referring to the president as a ruler. Like, no, they're not a ruler. Let's look at this and remove all this romantic ideas about leadership and power. Like, they're an administrator. That's
Hmm.
it. And my one hope is maybe some people will start to view it that way as something more prosaic than this leader of the free world. That
Yeah.
drives me crazy when they frame it that way. The leader of the free world. I can't imagine everyone else in the quotes free world hearing that and being like, that's right. He's my leader.
Yeah.
No, we
Yeah.
have the most money. That's all.
Yeah, I've heard that line of thinking before. It makes a lot of sense. It's like Trump shows that the emperor has no clothes.
Right, exactly. And,
Yeah.
and that's my hope. And even as I'm saying it, I'm realizing that there are tens of millions of people who will idolize him no matter what. And so, great.
Hmm.
Maybe 100 more people will view the president as not this type of thing, but there's still 60 million that cognitive dissonance kicking in. Everybody, let's look at this realistically. It's a
Yeah.
person working a system. That's it.
Yeah. And like every bill that he says he's going to pass, it still has to get passed by Congress, which is like, for example, why he couldn't get that travel ban instituted, why
Right.
he's had so much trouble building his wall, and he's definitely done some bad shit too, for sure, in my
Yeah.
opinion. But like those are examples of how it's in this with Trump, it's good that he doesn't have as much power as the president is perceived to have.
Right. Uh, my fear now is that so he knows how to manipulate the media, obviously,
Hmm.
because that's the only reason people even view him as a success, even pre-presidency. But he doesn't necessarily understand the power of it. So now with some of his talk about the squad, um, and people going back to where they came from, what I it's sad. I can see a scenario where someone winds up getting hurt, um, as a direct result. So I believe he's created kind of a tone in this country where people feel more comfortable being hateful and stupid, and that's already
Yeah.
led to people getting hurt. But now he's kind of taking the veil away from me. He's making it so he can't even plausibly deny anything with his current stuff where he's saying I think it's I forget which one of the congressmen or women he's talking about, but he's singling out one.
One of them
And
was Ilan Omar or
yes,
Ilian Omar.
yes,
I forget how you
that's
say her
the one.
first name. Yeah.
And that's dangerous. That's really dangerous in a way that's not world policy, but that's the alarming thing. And I think he's doing it as a child plays with matches. I don't
Yeah.
I don't know that he is fully aware of the possibilities of what might happen, and that's which is his fault because he should be at this point, whether he wants to take responsibility for it or not. He has led to people being hurt and killed, but
Yeah.
he'll be
Oh
direct.
yeah. Well, just like Obama and Bush, he has illegally authorized drone strikes on countries without declaring war on them. So, like in that way, he's a war criminal, just like the last two presidents.
Right. Which, oh, I love people to look on people's faces when I you know Bush is still a horror show, or was still a horror show.
Yeah,
Like he is not better by comparison. And Obama, he presented better, uh, but to me, he was a squandered promise. Like, and,
yeah,
and I naively wanted to believe in him, and I mean, I think you can trace a direct line from, let's say, Clinton to Trump. There's no real branching away. One led to the other.
yeah.
I,
Like we can think about this in terms of the drug war, for example, too. Like I think it was I think it was I don't remember whether it was Bill Clinton or Barack Obama who did which one, but one of them instituted mandatory minimums, and one of them instituted three strike laws, which put which unnecessarily put more people in jail for nonviolent drug offenses.
right. Well, I think it was Clinton that did. Maybe both.
Maybe both. Oh,
Yeah, I think so. Mandatory minimums. That sounds like Clinton,
okay.
who people lionized up until, thankfully, people started questioning him too. Like, wait a minute, he's as terrible as Harvey Weinstein. He's as terrible as Trump, really.
Yeah,
Yeah, and yeah, civil liberties. They were absolutely. We lost a lot of liberty after 9/11, but it was eroding before that. I think the last president to really believe something was probably Reagan, who I'm no fan of. But it's like we have been going down the tubes as far as that goes, where there's a belief in anything.
oh, that's interesting. Well, what do you think of that in terms of the recent Democratic debates? Because I didn't actually even watch them myself. I just watched like a whole bunch of different commentaries on certain parts about particular politicians that I like more. Like even though I'm Canadian, I'm a fan of Tulsi Gabbard and Andrew Yang, and well, one of the reasons that I like both of them is that it seems like they actually do have some genuine beliefs, and it seems like a lot of the other people, they were kind of just saying what they thought people wanted to hear.
Yeah, I didn't watch. I watched kind of the same way as you did, and I really watched for. I like Yang too. I think a lot of them are just saying what people want to hear. I think Warren really has some ideas. I don't know if she has a chance at all. I think uh, I was a Bernie person, but he kind of lost me with he just demonizes Wall Street, and he's just saying the same stuff over and over again. So he doesn't have a chance either. Biden is a horrible choice.
Yeah,
Um, it was a great moment when Kamala Harris called him out, but she's basically a cop,
yeah,
and I I nobody I like is going to come out of this on top, um, right off the bat. I can tell you that. But
hmm
I think Yang did a terrible job communicating his for the limited time that he had. And Tulsi Gabbard, I don't know, people hate her for some reason. That I don't
they
know enough about
she's
her to
not
understand.
she's not pro-war enough. Like that's
Is that
people
it? Like,
people accuse her of being a fan of people like Assad because she has said that Assad is not a threat to the United States. Like Syria is not a threat because she's opposed to the war in Syria and other regime change wars. That's like her main platform issue, I
Okay,
would say. Yeah.
sounds good to me. We're certainly not helping anything by getting involved with Syria or Assad. Not to say Assad's a good person, but again, to keep going back to the one note of money. Okay, Assad's not a good person, but the Saudis are terrible. So
Why are we working with them?
exactly, if we really care, then let's walk it like we talk it. And again, this all goes to that media thing of like we're talking out of both sides of our mouths here. Let's be honest. If we want to go in there for this reason, let's be honest about it. Don't couch it as he's doing terrible things, possibly to his people. I don't know. Do you ever listen to Jimmy Dore?
Oh yeah, I've become a fan of his recently. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, he causes me to question whether those gas attacks happened, and these are questions I ask anyway. Like, don't. And this is what drove me crazy. I remember when Clinton was running for office, and he's saying stuff, and it's so obviously constructed to please a certain group of people. And to borrow something from Chevy Chase, don't pee on my shoes and tell me it's raining. Yeah, fine. If you're gonna pee on my shoes, that's bad. But if you're also gonna lie to me about it, to me, that's worse.
Yeah.
And yeah, like Tulsi Gabbard seems fine to me then, because if you want to go into Syria because we want to control Russia's forays into that area and secure oil and keep Israel secure, great. Then say that, and I can agree with it or disagree with it, but don't tell a fiction about it. I guess
Yeah.
that just personally offends me.
Jimmy Dore, I think he might actually be the person I first heard about Tulsi Gabbard from. The she basically has talked about Syria in almost exactly the same way that you were just talking about it. Like every time that gets brought up, she says Assad is a terrible dictator, but does it make sense to spend trillions of dollars and for like thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of Americans to lose their lives more every time there's a bad person in the world? Does America have to be the world police, like, and go and shut people down when they're not following this awesome Western democracy that should happen everywhere? It seems like a better idea to, even though there are bad people, to let other countries solve their own problems, unless there actually is terrible shit happening that could lead to a war or something like that. And then that's where people understandably say, like, where do you draw the line? That's why it can be a complicated issue.
Right. But so let's look at Rwanda. You know,
Yeah.
so that was the wrong color of people to care about, I guess. Like that happened,
That's a
and
good point. Yeah.
people they don't have oil that I know of. They're not next to our interests. So again, don't pee in my shoes and tell me it's raining.
Yeah.
And it is. So Assad's terrible, and so is Hussein, and so was the Shah, and so was, I forget all the names we put in Central America and South America. They're and this is, I think he's buffoon to say it, but this when Trump was running and saying stuff, and you shouldn't do this as the leader of a country, but when he said we're not squeaky clean either, he's correct.
Yeah. Yeah.
But now, but you don't say that to go to the Godfather. You don't go against the family.
Exactly.
Say
Yeah.
that privately, but don't go against the family. You know what I mean? And now because it suits him pandering to his base, like, let's ignore the fact that we're not squeaky clean. Let's ignore the fact that this horrible threat, and I'm saying that sarcastically, just so we're clear, at our southern border is a result of us not being squeaky clean. And let's do something positive with that. I forget what the number is. those trillions of dollars you wanted to build a wall with, and let's try something positive. Let's use our power for something good instead of just manipulating things in endless power plays. I don't know. I used to be strictly punk rock. I'm leaning a little hippie now with you know, if we're the most powerful and in quotes greatest nation on earth, let's use that the way Superman does. You know, like
Yeah.
and if we're not going to, let's be honest about it.
You know
If
what
we're left with
what I think is funny about the immigration debate is that people on both sides think that America is the greatest country, basically. Even though people who are like totally open borders, let's say, criticize the American government on immigration a whole lot. They want more people to come here, like whether they say it directly or not, because they think America is awesome, so more people should go there. And it's in the same by the same token, people who are anti-immigration, they think America's a great place. We don't need more people here. And it's interesting, like to talk with like my more right leaning friends, for example, about immigration. Like I myself, for a while before I actually investigated it myself, just kind of believed, oh, okay, we need to be really careful with immigration because I don't know, it sounds like some immigrants commit crimes. But then I looked at the other side of the argument and looked into it more, and I learned, well, no, even illegal immigrants, most of them aren't actually committing crimes, and they're not actually, for the most part, taking jobs that American citizens actually want. And often, I think I saw a study that Jimmy Dore had on one of his episodes that I looked up, and it was showing that Native American citizens, like as in Americans, people who live in America, commit more crimes than the illegal immigrants who come to their cities.
I mean that makes sense just for concentration of population. And
Yeah.
here's a novel take. I don't know enough about it to really have a huge, like I know what it
Oh
seems to
yeah.
be.
I'm not like I wouldn't say I am like I definitely am not a totally open borders person, but I'm definitely not a totally closed borders person either.
Right, right.
Yeah.
It seemed to work perfectly well that I used to be able to go to Canada without a passport. And I think,
Oh, you did?
oh yeah, we used to not need a passport to go to Canada or Mexico, and then I think it was because of 9/11. You have to. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. There's something. It just seems there's something else at play when you're that big on it. And the funny thing is,
Hmm.
when you said both sides think America's great, I thought you were talking about the border, which is a funny way to think about it too. Like obviously, the people who want to come in here, for the most part, I have to hope that the vast majority of them, they're not coming here because they think this is a terrible place,
Yeah.
So everybody involved thinks that this is a great place.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I know there are people that I respect who live closer to the border, who have talked about there being problems, and these are people of Mexican descent. Even I don't have any problems, but that's just my own experience. I don't know. That's a tricky one, but I do know whenever someone's making enough noise about something that you need to start it looking elsewhere.
Hmm.
It's that old magician trick of look at the boogeymen here. They're
Yeah,
scary. They're
exactly.
threatening. That way,
Well,
you're not
well,
paying attention to this
well,
mess.
like it's the extremes on both sides again, in terms of this issue that bother me. Like on one side, it's like, oh, all this crime is happening. There's Trump declares an emergency because of all the immigrants, and we need to get those walls up with gun turrets and that kind of
Right.
shit. And then, like people on the farthest other side of the argument, they're like, Trump has concentration camps. He's basically Hitler. And
Yeah.
both of those are just boogeymen, like you said.
Yeah. I wish I knew the answer other than just repeating it over and over again. Just ask the question, why is this the narrative being pushed? It's not because it's the only narrative. There is a reason this is being pushed. What are we missing? What's going to come to light 10 years from now?
Yeah.
When it's all settled down. And yeah, I would love to have the answers, because then I'd make billions of dollars.
Yeah. Well, you can just pretend to have the answers. Lots of people make lots of money doing that.
Yeah, well, yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I do think about it, coming to the dark side.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm gonna stay with the light midichlorians right now.
The good thing though, in a way, in terms of like the YouTube algorithms and stuff like that, is that especially for small channels like mine, not that many people watch my videos anyway, so there's less of an incentive for me to change my, or like alter my video titles according to what I think will be catchy for an algorithm. I mean, I do often, like with my video titles, like with this one, for example, I'll probably put Trump in the title because I know it'll probably get more people to watch it. But
Right.
I'm not gonna like change the title to Andrew and Jenkins talk about how the outrage is spreading everywhere and there will be a civil war.
Andrew crushes Jenkins' position on the border. Destroys whatever. Yeah.
With facts and logic.
I'm working on this show, or developing this show, coming from the premise, and this other guy that I'm working with, from the premise of all the stuff we like is really niche. Let's make something so bland and uninteresting, but interesting enough to the masses that the masses will be interested in it, and they'll watch it, and we will use description lines that I not to sound like snotty, but like the masses don't want to be irritated. They just want, they don't want to have to think about stuff. From my observations, they want to be told what to think about stuff. And this might go back to, I grew up loving punk rock, and one of my favorite bands had a song about Neutral Nation had a song about magazines telling you what to think. And I think that's what people want. So as we're developing this show, we have to keep, we had this discussion the other day. He keeps trying to come up with angles that would be really, really interesting. And my first reaction is, yeah, that would be interesting, but it's too deep. So no, we just want to do this. Here's your bread. Here's a piece of ham. Here's another piece of bread. You don't need a pickle. You don't need a banana pepper on there to make it interesting. This is what you want. Just consume it. Be silent. Die.
So is it intended to be like just sort of straight up news, like just reporting what's happening without trying to put any sort of slant on it?
Oh no, this isn't even a news. This is more pop culture type of thing. But it plays into that. Like if you're putting too much time into trying to make something quality, for the most part, you're missing the largest audience there is.
Oh, for sure. That's why people can make like 5 videos a day, all with outrageous titles, and make tons of money.
Right.
Yeah.
And even the quality stuff. I loved Breaking Bad. And
Oh,
Breaking
me
Bad
too.
was a hit for cable, and I loved up to a point Game of Thrones, and it was a hit for HBO. But it's not it briefly captured people's attention who read People and stuff like that. But the numbers aren't there to back up that this was what everyone was interested in, because it was a little too esoteric. It was not America's Got Talent. It required you to think about characters developing and to kind of like, oh, this character that I'm supposed to like is not very likable.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna turn on a bunch of judges listening to people sing. and so that's, I know it may seem a little cynical, but like, okay, so I play loud music that's very fun to play, and we might play in front of 50 people. Well, this is my shot at I wanna put my stuff in front of a million people instead, and I'll keep playing my interesting music for myself, but the
Yeah.
general public doesn't want interesting. They don't wanna ask those questions, they just want it given to them.
I think I notice sometimes too. I wonder if this is perhaps like a generational thing, like with millennials or with generation iGen or Generation Z or whatever you call the generation below me. I've noticed that people like around my age range or especially younger than me, if they're watching something, they're not really paying full attention to it. It's like something they want to have on the TV, but not have to pay that much attention to while they look at their phone the whole time.
Yeah, yeah, well, it's a rule in my house, 1 screen on at a time, 1 screen on in a room, that's it. I don't know, I don't know if this generational, it's just technology has made that possible. I can't say that I wouldn't do the same when I was a kid. I, you know, I made a lot of mistakes when I was a kid, and it's certainly, yeah. I don't like to get into the like the generational definitions, but having kids myself, I won't say you're wrong. They will put on stuff in the background, and for a while it was a bad habit in my house even before kids. My wife and I, we'd come in, we'd turn on the television, and then we'd just walk around. And it was the equivalent of just, I'm going to turn on a light in this room and then walk around the house. It's no, the content is there, but it's really just background noise for life.
Yeah, it seems like it seems like people do that with news a lot or something like that. Like
Yeah.
get home from work, just turn on the news on the TV while I'm getting ready for supper or something like that, and maybe not necessarily pay that much attention to it.
Yeah. It's a habit. It's a viewing habit that I can't believe that news still exists as an industry.
Yeah.
um, because really there's so little useful. And even when I was doing it full time, like I beyond the story I worked on, I wouldn't know what's going on, and it didn't affect my life in the least.
Yeah. Well,
And
even though I think I definitely am I pay too much attention to the news sometimes. I know that when I'm better about deliberately paying very little attention to the news, I realize, oh, I didn't really miss anything that important. Like
right,
that's why, especially when I'm looking at like a political video that I want to watch, I avoid the ones with the outrageous titles, but I also try to avoid ones that have like a name in the title of the person I've never heard of, because I always think I have limited brain space. I don't also want to put this person's story now in my brain since I probably won't hear about them a month from now or something like that.
yeah, well, that is something that I've learned. Like, wait a minute, this is not going to be important in X period of time, so why get worked up about it?
Yeah.
If it's not causing a greater danger to the public psyche anyway, which for the most part most things don't. Like
Yeah.
we talked about the negativity that's going on right now, that is a danger.
Hmm.
Kids growing up without the the inclination to question things, that is a danger. But
Yes.
by and large, most of it's just junk. It's just filler, because you got
Yeah.
to fill that 22 minutes for your half-hour broadcast, or you got to fill that 24 hours. Like the Jonathan Haidt, the way he describes the 24-hour news cycle leading to people believing their kids are at risk every second of the day.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
One of the best, I forget, I was watching something, and they used to do sweeps, which is when they get their ratings, and that's what they base their ad rates on. So during sweeps, a tease came on during whatever show I was watching, and they were talking about this household item could be deadly. And then would be like, what what common household item could pose a risk to you and your family's health? Tune in at 11 to find out. And again, I'm not one to watch the news, but I had to see this one, and it was rubber bands. and I'm not making it up.
You can
You
say
can
that
joke
about
on
like
it.
almost anything in your house.
Yeah,
Like,
well,
have you
exactly.
heard of this item in your house that could kill you? Hardcover books.
Right.
Don't
You're
buy
right.
hardcover
They could
books. They're
fall. You
dangerous.
could trip over them. They could cut your finger with the paper. And we had to do that at one point. It was called Whiff'em. What's in it for me? So every story we did had to connect to the viewer. So a family of 18 are killed in a house fire. The reporter would have to do a stand-up where they'd have a candle because the candle caused it. Use the candle, make sure it's at least a foot away from the wall or anything else. And they'd have a string. Like, what? I wanted to bring down governments when I got into the press. I wanted to go cover catastrophes and everything else. And that is fun, like hurricanes and blizzards. But I'm doing Whiff'em. Like, this isn't what I signed up for.
Yeah. And like I was just thinking too, it's funny how like if you just look through the titles of YouTube videos or something like that, how many of them sometimes are about, did you hear what Trump tweeted? Or did you hear what this person tweeted about this person? Let's make a whole video about this Twitter battle. Or
Right.
this person comments on that person's commentary on their video and takes down and destroys that person.
Yeah, well, that is now, especially since the last election, that is so common. Trump says this about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez destroys Trump in Twitter rant. Trump goes like, I don't need to know this. So I'm with you. Anytime I see it, I avoid.
It's just like teenage girls gossiping.
It really is.
Oh my God, did you hear what Sally said about Jan yesterday? Oh my God, did you see her retort on Twitter? The way
And then
she
everyone
said...
gets mad when you say, I didn't see that.
Oh!
I happily didn't pay any attention to any of that. What? Yeah! I'm sorry, I'm watching videos about Middle Earth. Interesting to me.
Have you seen the newest Wheel of Time spoilers episode though?
No.
Yeah. So much more interesting than the newest Twitter battle.
Oh, okay. I abandoned Wheel of Time once he died before it finished. The Wheel of Time broke my heart. I know.
Oh, did it?
It did, because I was reading it as it was coming out up to a point, and then it just took forever. And then he died. And then
Brandon Sanderson finished this series.
And he's good. He's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you read Sanderson?
I've read, I forget the series, the one where the guys have the shard swords.
I'm not sure. I've only read the first two Mistborn books by him so far, and that doesn't sound familiar, so I'm not sure which one those are.
I might be remembering it completely wrong.
But I just brought up Wheel of Time spoilers as a rhetorical question to compare myself to you. Like I do watch political videos, but then I'll also watch like really extremely detailed philosophy videos, or like I'll watch videos about fantasy or science fiction or stuff like that too.
Yeah, I will. I'll watch both ends of the spectrum, but then for the most part, I'm like, if I want to know about it, I'll read or listen to a book. And if I'm watching a video, I want to be entertained at this stage. So if I know there's new stuff coming out, then I'll check it out. But I don't dig too deep anymore. It's a dangerous path.
It is, yeah. And that's it. That's yeah, that word dangerous is fitting too, because I was just thinking about how it can be easy to go down that rabbit hole, but then again, like we've talked about already, you do need to like investigate things sometimes, and then I'm thinking like it can be hard to determine where to draw that line too. Like have I learned enough to know what's really going on behind what this person is saying, or do I need to learn more? And then at one point do you get to the point where you think, oh, there is where my outrage trigger is flipped.
Right, right. I you know, one of the best podcasts for staying abreast of that stuff is called Cognitive Dissonance, and they do it comedically, but they'll give you a source for where the story's coming from, and if you want to dig deeper, you can dig deeper.
Oh, okay.
So and again, like Jimmy Dore is a comedian, Brian Callen
Right.
is a comedian, John Oliver is a comedian, even Crowder is a comedian.
Mm-hmm.
I've never seen his stand up, but I I like when it's couched in humor, and then I can look more deeply into things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and sometimes I sometimes I won't agree with Jimmy Dore. Sometimes I won't. Sometimes I will agree with Crowder on things. It's a tightrope, man. It's a
Don't let
tightrope.
some people hear you say that last part.
I know. I know. Like I said, tightrope. I live on the edge.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know. I don't know if you saw this. I posted on Mixed Mental Arts the other day, like a long list of the varying political persuasions of people who I think I said I agree with like each of these people 70-ish% or so. And
Okay.
and which means that I definitely am contradicting myself sometimes, but it was like I listed basically from a few Marxists to progressives to centrists to libertarians and conservatives, and then all the way to Heidegger, who's a famous philosopher but also was a Nazi supporter.
Well, that's very evolved of you to have to not like. Okay, so I interviewed a guy today. His grandfather was a friend and colleague of H.P. Lovecraft,
Oh,
and
cool.
um, you know, H.P. Lovecraft wrote some awesome stories. H.P. Lovecraft also had some kind of gross beliefs about immigrants and different races and stuff.
Oh, I
That
didn't
doesn't.
even know that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, in some of his letters, he kind of gave that away. But like, okay, but you know what? Call of Cthulhu is still a good story, and
Yeah.
I don't just yeah, I don't condone somebody sympathizing with Nazis in the least, because I think hating people because of the way they were born is one of the laziest things there is. There's
Hmm.
so many other reasons to hate people.
And I don't know if you've read much of Heidegger, but he's like I would if I hadn't heard about it before, I wouldn't have had any idea that he was that way. I think he was that way. I think he like supported Hitler or something like that. But I learned about that before I started learning about his philosophy, and everything I've read by him about philosophy says nothing whatsoever about anything even remotely related to Nazis or Jews or anything like that.
So in no, so it doesn't even line up. So he was a supporter. Okay, yeah. I don't know. I'm a philosophy for dummies type. Uh, I do listen
Okay.
to Philosophize This, which is another good podcast, but
Oh yeah.
I don't deep dive into philosophy. It makes my brain hurt.
Yeah, I started doing that in the past year or so, mostly due to Tim Keefe's influence, I guess, because he's he's like got an encyclopedic knowledge of philosophy and loves to talk about it, and I love to learn about it, and I find it way more fascinating to get into the details, especially like of what philosophers think about other philosophers. Like to me, it's like a much more useful form of gossip than paying attention to that in terms of like politics or so you think you can dance or something like that.
I'll buy that. I'm jealous of people who know a lot about the philosophers. I've just not. My attention has always gone somewhere else. Mainly, I wish I knew more about it so I could talk to people at parties and impress them with how brilliant I am. Um, yeah, so I don't know that much, but I mean, my point is like, does it negate everything about a person when there's one bad thing?
No.
And
I don't think
so
so.
it's pretty
Well,
brave of you to put that up there, where it's these are
oh, I'm
people
sure.
actually.
I haven't looked at the comments on it, but I'm sure I can think of at least two or three people who always comment sort of the same way when I post stuff like that. That
Yeah,
I can I can kind of predict what they'll say. But like I listed Heidegger, and I listed like the Marxists that I listed too, because I think they have, especially with the Marxists, they do delve into their Marxist theories about capitalism and economics a little bit sometimes, but most of the time, like one of them is Slavoj Zizek, who's a philosopher. You might have heard that he debated Jordan Peterson recently.
okay, yeah,
Um,
yeah,
yeah, and then this other guy I mentioned is Frederick Jameson, who's a Marxist sociologist, but he mostly talks about sociology, and Slavoj Zizek mostly just talks about philosophy. So the their political views they're more obvious than Heidegger, but that's really not what they're all about for the most part. So I mean, I tried to list people on the widest spectrum possible just to demonstrate the wide perspective of thinking that I'm okay with entertaining.
right. How bold of you.
Yeah.
How dare you? I did remember Heidegger. Heidegger was a boozy beggar who could drink you under the table.
What's that? I've never heard that before.
Monty Python's philosopher.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
They pronounce it differently. Yeah. So you're doing that from the best of intention,
Yeah.
but there are still going to be people who I don't even know if they're really offended by it, but there will be people, and I know I've stepped back from reading a whole bunch of stuff on Facebook, but there will be absolutely a ton of people to be outraged at that.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Well, especially since probably most people don't know that Heidegger is like a really famous philosopher, and everyone who knows anything about Heidegger knows that he was a Nazi supporter, but every philosopher barely even mentions that because he barely even mentions anything about that. So
right?
if someone studies philosophy, I've never even heard of an example, although I'm sure there are some, of serious like academic philosophers who actually are outraged by people like Heidegger who are Nazi supporters, or by Marxists or something like that. Like it seems like people who study philosophy are maybe more open-minded about considering what people have to say about their ideas. I mean, maybe I'm biased for saying that because I've been nerding out on philosophy for the past year and a half or so, but it kind of seems that way to me.
Yeah, it would make sense if that's the case. I mean, academics, that's a whole other world of media. That's a whole other conversation. Um, yeah, they're no different. For all of their vaunted intellect, they're really, in my experience, they're really no different from everyone else. And they're, to go back to that conference I talked about way back, they're going to stick with things that, or they're going to tend to stick with things that support what they're doing.
Oh yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Of course, like every philosopher has an ideology and is biased like everyone else.
Yeah.
Like and like they certainly have opinions too. Like I remember when I went back to school briefly a few years ago. Um, it was interesting. Every single one of my teachers, that only one of them was like this sort of like university stereotype of him being like he was a self-declared socialist and he went to anti-Trump rallies and stuff like that. But
Hmm.
my other teachers, they weren't they didn't have the same political persuasions as him, but they would always bring up Trump just as an example in the class, not in like an insulting way or anything, but they would always use him as
He's
an
an obvious
example.
reference. Yeah, I mean, he's in
Yeah,
the he's in the public mind,
yeah.
so that makes sense. Yeah.
But I think it seems like they didn't always they didn't always directly present it this way, but they all seem to have the mindset of that Trump is bad. I think, which
That makes sense. I would tend to agree with it, but yeah,
yeah,
I
I mean
can't imagine
I do too.
anybody
But
in.
I was just saying that to illustrate your point that philosophy professors and academics in general are people too, of course.
Oh yeah, right. Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
that was such a good point they made. No, but you know, yeah, like I said, that's a whole other conversation. But
Oh yeah.
it is a world that I dipped my toes into and just came away shocked. Like, oh, I thought this was. I don't know when I'm going to stop expecting something to be different. You know, like I said, I got into journalism thinking the fourth estate bringing down power, defending the weak. Nope. I went into education, educate people, teach them how to not what to think, but how to think. Nope, not going to save the world that way either. Academia, that's got to be nope. Turns out that's the same thing too, and it goes to what you said. There's that people. It's
Oh
that's
yeah.
the common denominators. People
Oh
with
yeah.
their stories that they're bringing and their cultures that they're from, and by cultures I'm using it in the mixed mental arts way of each family is its culture on its own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like in terms of academia, interestingly enough, it was actually studying philosophy that, well, in combination with mixed mental arts, I have to say too, um, that both of those are why I would definitely not say I put academia on a pedestal. I'm very skeptical of it, even though I personally myself love learning about academic topics.
Yeah, I'm with you. Um, then when you see behind the curtain, that you're like, oh, I don't know. It's always a struggle, especially like media literacy wise. Of like, you don't want to become a cynic. You want to maintain a healthy skepticism. But then the more you learn, the harder it is to not become a cynic. And that's
Yeah,
why I choose. Like I actively, when I say I choose optimism, I'm actively at some points being like, no, this doesn't matter. I will feel myself going down the slide, and in the past have just fully embraced cynicism.
oh yeah, me too.
Because it's a very hard thing to maintain, and I could see at some point in life, later in life, hopefully, just sliding into that chasm of
It is easy to be cynical, right?
yeah, it's super easy, which is
Yeah,
why it's such a danger. It's
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Hmm. Well, I've I've run out of ideas to talk about. Do you have
I,
anything else that
I
you can
win.
think of?
No, I mean we really covered a pretty big spectrum here. I don't know
Yeah,
how much we got into education or anything. We did chat about the media though, for sure.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
no, I really I enjoyed speaking with you. I like listening to your podcast. I usually will put it on the phone and drive to it.
Oh, cool.
So,
Thanks, man.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it was great talking to you too. It seems like we have more in common in terms of our worldviews than I realized, which is cool.
So, in the interest of not engaging in strengthening our bubble, let's never speak again.
Oh
Then,
yeah.
like, oh, great, two people who agree on stuff. Ugh.
Yeah,
No, so yeah, it was. I can't think of anything right now, but like I'd be up for doing it again
for
whenever.
sure, man.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Well,
Cool outro. You need
yeah.
you need intro.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
outro.
Since you have seen the episodes, I like to say specific things at the end, and then yeah, you can give any plugs or last words there if you want to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't have anything to plug right now, but
Okay.
give it your hippie
All right.
spiel.
All right. All right. Thanks everyone for watching another episode of the Mindgasms podcast. If you found this as enjoyable as I did, and
I did.
and Jenkins did too. And like I always say, thank you to everyone who subscribed to my channel and to those of you who share this video, and especially to those of you who contribute to me on Patreon. I really appreciate that. And like I always say, I love you all. Keep being the tiny beam of light that shines through the almost impenetrable darkness in the universe. And most importantly, always remember this: the funk cures all. All right. Keep having mindgasms, everyone. And just remember, if you're getting cynical about the media, just turn on some funk. All right. Any last words there?
That's I can't top that. I can't
All
top
right.
that. That's I'm a straight edge. I can't come up with this stuff. You're more dialed into that. So
All right.
it's fantastic. Let's do it again.
All right. Cool. Thanks, man. All
Later.
right. Thanks, everyone. And adios until next time.